Yeah.
Okay.
Where?
Mitzvah Shem. Okay, today's daf is daf chaf. So I'm going to work under the assumption that everyone's holding stark in Hilchas Avelis.
Yeah.
No hakdama required. We can go bling right into it, or do we need a little?
Yeah, no, we do.
We need it? No, we're good. You comfortable?
Yeah.
Do we need a little review of some of the halachas a little bit just to be comfortable, or we just bang right into it? You good? Okay. All right. We're holding daf chaf, which is really for us daf Yud Tesamid base 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 lines from the bottom.
I just have one question.
Yeah, go for it.
I've never been in the parsha. When your shiva is like partially abolished, does the shloshim still count the 30 days from it? That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me say, it depends if you started the shloshim.
That's correct from yesterday. Yeah.
I'm saying,
But you're talking about if, let's say, you haven't started the shloshim, right?
Yeah.
So shloshim isn't canceled.
yeah.
You want to know,
I don't know where you count from to count shloshim?
Oh.
Is it from the death, or do you like
No.
up the days?
No. So the way it would work is let's say it's 3 days of shiva where nayig and then yantiv comes. So we consider it as if you've been nayig 7 days already.
Right.
So that means the first day of yantiv is your 8th day.
So they have 23.
Right. So you already right. And then it'll depend if we consider yantiv being ola leminion or not,
Right.
which is a discussion in today's Gemara. But yeah.
And then the second days of Yom Tov
Right.
abolish your shloshim, but I'm not asking about that part.
Meaning there are multiple sort of layers to it, right? So on one level, there's an individual's responsibilities, like as will come up today a little bit. What happens if you find out about the death later? So what are your dinim, right? So it's clear that the hanhaga of Avelis is on one level very much related to when the mace happens, when he's put into the ground, but it's also related to you, and well, not you, but to a person who's finding out about that information. So you might have a person, so for instance, let's say you have a person who has 2 brothers, and one lives in Eretz Yisrael and one lives in Chutz La'aretz, right? So it could happen afgemina, let's say, when Yontif falls, depending upon, again, it won't have much of an afgemina because the first day is always going to be the same, but you can come up with scenarios where, depending upon the situation, or maybe, Purim isn't going to be Deichet, but I'm saying you can have scenarios where maybe it'll make an afgemina, where you can have 2 brothers that are Nayeg.
So it doesn't go to the shloshim.
Say that?
The Yom Tov knock the shloshim down a little bit. It doesn't kill the shloshim.
So let's use accurate words. So there's being mevatel the shloshim, which means shloshim is done.
Yeah.
That only happens if shloshim started before yantiv. If shloshim had not started, then we use the days of yantiv and they count towards shloshim.
Right.
Meaning, even though generally there are no hanhagas of avelis on yantiv, on Chol Moed,
Right.
generally speaking, although B'tzina for sure there are, meaning
Right.
let's say Tashra Shemitah,
Right.
and some other things. The days count towards the shloshim, right? So.
Right.
So, for instance, we were discussing yesterday. Let's say you have a scenario where I think it was with your mother, 3 days before Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, the shiva.
So Shiva was canceled by Rosh Hashanah, and then which means Shloshim started first day Rosh Hashanah.
Right.
So Aseres Yemei Tshuva, those 10 days were the first 10 days of his Shloshim, which really were technically days 8 to 18, and then Yom Kippur came. Because we count the first 3 as if 7 was completed. Yom Kippur came and knocked out Shloshim, and he was done. He was done after Yom Kippur.
And the same would be true with Yom Kippur and Sukkot? Meaning,
Yes.
So those are the only 2 that knock out Shiva and Shloshim.
Yeah. Now that meaning, yeah, correct. Meaning, if let's say a person never became an avil in the middle of a Aseres Yemei Tshuva, Yom Kippur would knock out his Shiva, and now Sukkot would knock out his. And even though we saw in the Mishnah yesterday that the Mishnah was pretty clear that this entire concept of knocking out a Shiva only happens once you have 3 days of Shiva, we don't pass like that. As we'll see in today's Gemara, it's very clear.
We don't visit people.
You don't visit, meaning on Yontif, you're not Menachem Ovel on even though you're not Menachem Ovel afterwards. Yeah. So we'll see some things in today's Gemara that are going to be not.
Pesach the same as Sukkot then?
Yeah. So Pesach and Sukkot are no different.
Yeah.
In terms of the halacha.
Well, what was the Shmini Atzeres?
It's a very good question. I'm not 100% sure about that. Meaning, do we consider Shmini Atzeres part of Sukkot in the sense that it's not a second Yontif? I'm pretty sure we treat it as one Yontif, but I'm not 100% sure.
Otherwise, we have Sukkot always knocking out a Shiva
And a Shloshim, right?
which I don't think is the
Yeah.
case.
But that's a good question. I mean, I know that when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, we're going to see in today's Gemara when we're talking about the drasha of where do we learn out Shiva from. it comes from the pasuk of Chag. We learn that Chag and Abel from a smichas in the parsha. Hakish in the pasuk. So Tosfos was going to ask, well, how does the Gemara learn out 7 days from Pesach? Why not learn 8 days from Sukkot? And he says, no, Shmini is Yom Tov B'fnei Atzmai. So you have to sort of work out exactly how much of a Yom Tov B'fnei Atzmai it is in the Ilchas Avelos, because otherwise maybe you're right. Maybe it would not get a shloshim. I'm not 100% sure. That's a good question. Either way, your Testament base, 6 lines from the bottom. Boy minei Abaye me Rabba. They changed the gears here. Kavra beregel. Let's say a person becomes an avel. Remember, we're going to work under the assumption, just a very quick thing, we're going to work on the assumption that a person becomes an avel when the body is put into the ground and covered with dirt. That is the shita of Rov Rishonim, that's when a person's avelus starts. There may be other shitas, but that's the general opinion. That's number one. And we're also going to work within the assumption, generally speaking, that avelus first day is min hatayra. So machlekes Rishonim, the Rambam holds, and Rov Rishonim hold it's a din deraisa avelus, min hatayra. And that din min hatayra is specifically when it's the first day that the body is buried on that day, meaning of aninos and avelus on that first day. Once nighttime comes, it's only midirabanan at that point. There are Rishonim who hold even the first day is midirabanan, but generally speaking, most Rishonim hold that it's deraisa. And we treat Hilchas Avelus very kal in many areas, as we saw already from Shmuel, and we'll see again today from Shmuel, I think, that Shmuel holds that halach is like the divrei hamekel in Avelus, so.
What about Aninos? Everyone says it's the Raisa?
Yeah, Aninos is for sure the Raisa. Yeah. But the first day of actual Hanaga of Avelis, a different Rishonim learn different, the Rif, the Ram, they all have different opinions as to what the pasuk is for Avelis is. Some mention the pasuk you're mentioning, others mention others, but okay. Boy minei abayim merabah, cover beregel. Let's say a person becomes an Avel on Yantiv, meaning the person dies and they make the Kavura on Chalamayit, or at some point over Yantiv. Regel oilo leminyan shleishim, oy ein regel oilo leminyan shleishim. And again, what we would be asking over here is, let's just speak it out in the Gemara. Liminyan shiva loikami bayali. Abaye is saying, I don't have a question about shiva, meaning again, nothing's been nahig before Yantiv, so nothing is canceled here. You're going to have to do shiva and you're going to have to do shloshim. The question is exactly how do you do it? Do we say that the days of Yantiv should count or not count? So you say, for Shiva, you're for sure going to have to be Noyeg Shiva and all of the halachas of Shiva after Yantiv is over. That for sure is the case. Yeah? Do you think it'll be a minute? I'll wait. So let's wait 10 seconds and see if the conversation gets curtailed.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. So Abaye explains this question. Shiva for sure is going to have to be noyeg after Yantiv, meaning Yantiv is going to be over. You're going to start counting the first 7 days, and you're going to be noyeg all of the dinim of Shiva. So Ni'ilas Hasandal, Kfiyas Amita, whatever those halachas are. The loy nahaga mitzvah Shiva beregel, and he says the reason why I'll never count any of the days of Yantiv towards Shiva is because you're never noyeg any of the normal dinim of Shiva on actual Chalamayit. One wouldn't observe someone in the middle of Chalamayit and accidentally conclude, oh, look, he's in Shiva. No one's walking around in non-leather shoes and turning his bed over and all this other stuff. Yeah. I'm only asking, maybe we can count the days of Yantiv towards the Shloshim in this specific scenario. Why? Because even though the reason why you're not getting a haircut and the reason why you're not laundering on Chalamayit has nothing to do with Avelos. It's entirely a malacha on Chalamayit problem. But in the end of the day, what you're doing is an act of Avelos, whether you like it or not. You're not getting a haircut and you're not cleaning your clothes. So could we say that that's already like enough of a hanhaga of Avelos? It's not your intent to do it as enough. But in the end of the day, one could point to that and say, look, he's already sort of taken care of some of his shloshim, in which case, and again, let's just clarify the question. What would be the halacha? If you hold that the days of Yantiv, Ola, are towards shloshim, you definitely have to do 7 days of Shiva. But the question is, how many days at that point, starting with the 8th day after Shiva, would you still need to go towards to make it a shloshim? If we count the 7 days of Yantiv, right, then shloshim will be only 16 days after the Shiva is over because you're using 7 days of Yantiv already. Whereas if you don't have that, so then you're going to have to count another 7 days on top. So you'll need another 23 days like a normal case of shloshim. And that's his question. Amrleya, Rabba answers, Eina Oila, it doesn't count. Meaning, you're right, you're not getting a haircut, you're not laundering, but that's not an Avelis Dika Halacha. That's a Yantiv Dika Halacha. You can't count that, and therefore the din is that after Yantiv you start Shiva, and then you continue shloshim afterwards.
It's like we look for excuses to make Avelus less.
Again, that is a theme you're going to see a lot. You're going to see that we're generally looking to find kulas whenever we're going to. And I think more here in these sugyas than maybe you find in other sugyas, the Gemara is constantly looking to know what's the halacha, what's the halacha, what's the halacha. You see halacha kahim, and then it seems there's always Shmuel who comes in afterwards and says, mekel, because Shmuel holds a mekel by hilchas avelus, which is generally the case. Like we saw that a little already by Abishol, right? Abishol, when it came to the question of whether we hold mitzvahs hayom kikula or not, right? That portion of the day, we paskin like Abishol, not only on the seventh day, even if it's in the middle of Shiva, even if it's the first 30 minutes of Shiva, at the end of Shloshim, we hold like Shmuel, and this is how we paskin. Mitzvah hayom kikulo is always the case. Okay, and we'll see it'll come up again on Chafim Mebes. Eisvei. So we just said that Rabbah holds it does not count. Yontiv does not count towards Shloshim. Eisvei. A brisa that's going to seem to be a kasha on that. And this brisa is going in the sheet of our Mishnah, which again we don't hold like, that says that the entire concept of Yontiv canceling Shiva, you need 3 days first. We hold it's even a moment. As long as you're noyig some type of avelus, it cancels it. But the brisa here is going in the shita, as we'll see later on in the Gemara, the shita of Rebbe Eliezer, who holds like Bishamai. We'll see that holds that you need to have a minimum of 3 days of Shiva in order for it to cancel it. But we don't hold like that. This brisa says, so you had a person die 2 days before, that person becomes, his relative becomes an avel. What is he supposed to do? So he's naig the 2 days of Shiva beforehand. Yontif comes, it doesn't cancel it because you don't have 3 days. Now you have this sort of uncommon scenario where you're continuing the Shiva afterwards, but really it's 9 days later, right? So you have 9 days later, you're continuing your Shiva for another 5 days, right? So there's a more kal element to this hanhaga of Shiva because it's really already happening many days later. So therefore, whereas the following halachos normally would not apply during Shiva, in this scenario of this quasi Shiva, period, we're going to be a little more makel and benegea what? Whereas normally we don't allow the malacha to be done by others during those 5 days. We will allow the malacha to be done by other people. The avada v'shefchosav. So we don't normally allow his servants to do anything bestina for him. Again, different types of avelus, whereas here we will. In Rabbi Misaskin by, and here we say that we're not menachem avel. We don't go to pay a shiva call during those 5 days, meaning he already got that taken care of on Yontif. The Gemara says shekfarnis asku by beregel. Because since in the end of the day, even though people aren't, let's say, intentionally going to be menachem avel, but he spent time with people on Yontif. So people are going to ask him, how you doing? How you holding up? What's going on? And since he's going to end up getting the nechama from the conversation and from the, social interaction with other people, the benefit of going to be menachem avel isn't really there anymore already by the time you get to the 5 days after Yontif, because he's having that on Yontif itself, and therefore you don't have that din. So again, there's a certain kula. Now again, this is irrelevant for us, meaning like us, if any time before Yontif, even a moment of Shiva happens, Shiva's knocked out. And in fact, if you can ask Kalman, and my wife also had it when her brother passed, it's very difficult. I mean, it's a very difficult scenario when halacha tells you you're not going to be an avel and you lose out on Shiva. Shiva is a very comforting period of time. Thank God I don't know about it, but for some people, and you need it.
People have nothing if it's Erev,
My brother-in-law passed away. It was the day before, and then Yontif came, and
you just have the cemetery.
and then and even then it was COVID, so we couldn't even really do a proper situation. I went with a sister-in-law, and we had to wear the masks and social. It was mamish right in the middle of that whole craziness. Really, really made it difficult.
Even in a situation like where Shiva's knocked out, people could informally visit.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's not saying here in the Gemara that there's an isser to go be menachem avel. What it's saying is there's no din mitzvah for him to accept people and whatever.
So you're going to be less on Yontif on Pesach. So you wait until Yontif is over before you start sitting Shiva.
Yeah, you don't sit Shiva.
Happens all the time because people die during Sukkot, during Pesach.
Never happens. Yeah.
I'm saying, do people get buried on
Yontif? On Chol Hamoed you bury. Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about Chol Hamoed. I'm talking actually.
You could, if you have to. You do like day guy different. I think we generally hold off till Chol Hamoed, but Maker at din you're allowed to.
It's too hard for us today to deal with the great things in Europe. When they controlled everything, they used to sometimes do it.
Yeah, we generally, again, I'm not. I really don't have a ton of knowledge of these halachas. Mostly, thank God, I just just haven't think,
So that
Continue,
means like 14 days, you can't, you have to go by what you can't normally do in a regular shiva. Like now it's,
in which scenario?
First night of Sukkot, right?
Let's say someone dies on Yontif.
Yeah.
First night of
the
Sukkot.
First day. The first day.
Yeah. So you're not knowing any public availus. So for instance, you don't Nilas Sandal, you don't do any of those things. But Sinna you're knowing, meaning with your wife, let's say. Otherwise you wait till after Yontif and then
you wear your regular shoes to shul.
Yeah.
You go to shul.
yeah, and you sing during davening and you showering.
Simchat.
Simchas Yontif. Simchas Yontif is doiche. I say the rabbim is doiche. Say the
That person's an owner.
You just lost your dad. It's the first.
Hashem says so, because our simcha is not because you feel happy. Hashem says you have to be besimcha.
Wait, that person's an O-name for 2 days because he hasn't buried the mace?
So that I'm not 100% sure about. That's a good question.
No, I don't think it is.
I don't think so.
What is the definition of Aninus? Isn't it anyone where it hasn't been buried?
Yeah, I don't think-
But I don't think we give him a status of he has no mitzvahs for 2 days. Yeah,
But you can bury on Yom Kippur,
yeah,
right?
100%. Yeah. It has to be done with halacha. I mean, if you're allowed. You have to be careful.
You have to take a car, right? You drive to the.
No, that's
That's
true.
how
No, he really got it.
So
We don't do it, but you could theoretically.
in Europe, when they had a next door cemetery,
I'm not 100%
they would
sure
bury,
about
but we have physical difficulty doing it, so we wait till after Yom Tov or
I
Shabbos.
think
Or the second day.
They never buried on Shabbos.
Not 100% about the first day, second day. Either way, so what is it saying in the Bryce? So remember, we're in the middle of trying to bring a raya or a kasha on Rabbah. Abaye asked Rabbah, do we count the days of Yontiv towards Shloshim when the misa happens on Yontiv? And Rabbah said, no, we don't. So the Bryce says first, what happens if you talk about a scenario where the misa happened 2 days before Yontiv? So it says you're nayig 5 days afterwards. Klal shel davar, kol shehu mishum avel regel mafsikai. And over here, what we mean here is not mafsika, the way it meant in the Mishnah. Here, mafsikai actually means that anything that is mishum avel, the regel is mafsika, meaning you're not nayig that on the regel and you continue it afterwards. But kol shehu mishum iskei rabin, but if it's for like being nayig shiva, like being menachem avel, paying a person a shiva call, ein regel mafsika, meaning the fact that you're together on Yontiv, it works towards accomplishing the 7 days of visiting him and providing him with comfort, and therefore there's no mitzvah to do it afterwards. Kavra, okay, so that's the ratio. The ratio is talking about where the burial happened 2 days before, and again, in the sheet of our mission, that means it's not mevatel Yontiv. I'm sorry, Yontiv is not mevatel avelis. What about kavra shlosha yomim b'sefer regel? What about it's on Yontiv, right? And it's done on the third to last day of Yontiv. So that's when the misa happens. So cholamayit. So now, but it's the last 3 days of Yontif. So what are you supposed to do now? So it says over here in the Brayz, Moina Shiva Achara Regel. You still have to be Nayik Shiva afterwards. Again, that makes sense. You're Nayik Shiva because you haven't been Nayik Shiva before, and you can't count that these last 3 days is Shiva because Avelis is not Nayik for Hesia on Yontif. However, Arba Yomim Rishonim of Shiva, the first 4 days of Shiva, Rabbi Misaskin Bay, there's a din for people to come visit and be Menachem him. Why? Because he's only gotten 3 days of that on Yontif, and these 4 days complete his 7-day requirement to have people visit him. Shlosha Yomim Achronim, in the last 3 days of Shiva, then we say Ein Rabbi Misaskin Bay, Shekfar Nisaskin Biregel, because he's already gotten 3 days of Nechama during Yontif. Again, those 3 days he still has Nilas Hasando, Kvias Amita, and the other normal dinam of Avelis, but in terms of people visiting him, not. Now, this next line is the key line here. Viregel Oilaloi. And here Rashi explains the regel oilaloi means lishloshim. This line regel oilaloi lishloshim, meaning a yontiv counts towards shloshim. So there's 2 cases in the Mishnah. The first case is where the body was buried 2 days before yontiv, right? And it wasn't mevatel shiva, and you count 5 days afterwards to finish your shiva. So now the question is, how many more days do you need to count from that to shloshim? Is it another 23 days, like we normally would say, or would we say the 7 days of yontiv count towards it, and it's only another 16 days? That's the Reisha, or is it the Seifa, where the Seifa says that you've now are doing Shiva 7 days after Yontiv, and then how many days after that? So Regel Oilaloi sounds like you count the days of Yontiv towards Shloshim. Is it going on the Reisha? Is it going on the Seifa? Is it going on both? If it's going on the Seifa, it's a Kasha on Rabbah, because the Seifa is exactly a case where the Misa happened on Yontiv. And since it happened on Yontiv, and the Brisa would be saying that it counts towards Shloshim, then what Rabbah answered Abaye is not true. My lava seifa, and that's the question. And so Rabbi answers, no, Aresha, it's going on the first case. What's the first case? First case is talking about, remember, where the the person was buried 2 days before Yantiv. So if 2 days before Yantiv, then it makes perfect sense. Why? Because why shouldn't I count the Shloshim? Like any normal case. You have a burial beforehand. It knocks out Shiva according to us. According to the Bryce, it doesn't. But regardless, Shloshim is Nayig. Why shouldn't Shloshim be Nayig? You count the days of Yantiv towards Shloshim.
You say halacha l'maisa, what do you think?
Halach l'maisa, we hold that in that scenario, Shiva would be done.
Yeah.
Right? And you start counting Shloshim ready for the first day of Yantiv. First day of Yantiv counts towards Shloshim. You don't necessarily act as a mourner because it is Yantiv, but you count it towards Shloshim.
Oh, you mean if Hashem does before
Yes.
Rosh Hashanah?
Like he did, yeah. So Rosh Hashanah becomes the first day of Shloshim. So and that's
only one day, right? Not more than one day.
What do you mean not more than one day?
Something jogs my memory that sometimes we count them more than one day.
I could be, I don't know what you're talking about. Could be, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So either way, so the point is over here, if it's talking about the Reisha, then it's fine, because the Reisha is talking about a case where the Misa happened before. But if it's talking about the Sefer where the Misa happened on Yantiv, then that's good for the question Abaye asked. When someone dies on Yantiv, do we count the Yantiv towards Shloshim or not? So here it says you do count it. So if it's going on the Sefer, it's a Kasha. He said, no, it's going on the Reisha. So the Gemara says, Eisvei, I have a different Bryce, and this Bryce is going to be a little much more, it's going to fight with a little bit more punch. The Bryce says, Regel oila loila minyan shloshim. Straight up. The Regel Yantiv is oila to shloshim. We count it towards shloshim. Okay, so what's the case? Kavra b'tchilas Regel, if it's talking about where the Kvura happens, on Yantiv in the beginning of Yantiv. So then, Moina Shiva Achara Regel, we count 7 days afterwards. But because since the Shiva is already like a little delayed, because mitzad, the person's emotional state, he's already had 7 days of time to get used to it, Nabuch, but he's gotten used to it a little bit. And so an element of the Shiva that happens afterwards is lightened up slightly so that we allow Malacha to be done Aidei Chayrim, whereas that normally would not be the case for a regular Shiva. And we allow certain elements of mourning to happen, certain elements of Malacha to happen as long as it's done Bitsina inside his house, Aidei, the Mishars and the people that work for him. The Ein Rabbim Misaskin Boy, and there's no need for being paying a shivukal, although we don't hold like this. We hold you go pay a shivukal. Shekvarnis asku by beregel, because you had it already. So far everything's consistent with the first brisa. And here's the point: beregel. In this case, there's no ration seifa. It's one case. What's the case? The guy died on Yontif. This is mamish the case of Abaye and Rabba. That Rabbi asked. Rabba said it's not oilo, and here the brisa says it is oilo tiyufta. The Gemara says it's tiyufta, and the halacha is it's always oilo. Meaning, generally speaking, I can't think of a scenario where it doesn't. Yontif is always oilo l'shloshim. The only time it's not oilo l'shloshim is if it cancels it. Meaning if shloshim starts beforehand, then it can't knock it out. But as long as it doesn't knock it out, we count yontif towards shloshim. And just in terms of counting how many days one needs to be nayig afterwards, right? Which is why Kalman on his scenario, once Yom Kippur came, he was done. Okay, so that's the first question of today's daf. Do we count towards Avelis? And we're coming out. Yes, we do. Pretty much in every scenario. That this, meaning this is just halacha, that even if the person dies on Yantiv, we count shloshim. That's the halacha. Tana Rabbana. This brisa here, you wouldn't think from reading it, but this brisa is the brisa that's chaylik on our Mishnah, which benegay the halacha of 3 days versus less than 3 days. Tana Rabbana. Let's say a person who's nayig avelis. Here it's just using one of the examples of Shiva, but it could have been any of them. It could have been Nilas Sandal. Kiyim kviyas amita shlosha yomim kodem haregel. Let's say a person had 3 days of avelus, of Shiva, before Yontiv came. Then einay tzarech l'chfois achar haregel divrei Rebbe Eliezer. Rebbe Eliezer holds that you need the 3 days. That's the sheet of our Mishnah. You need 3 days of Shiva in order for it to come and be mevatel de avelus. Meaning less than 3 days, Rebbe Eliezer would say, like the brisa we just saw earlier, that you do 2 days before and then 5 days after. And this is going to be the way we hold. As long as you have a little bit of time, and again, it seems to be mashma from the brisa here that according to the Chachamim, it's not enough that you became an oval an hour before. You have to be noyeg some form of avelos on that time, which oftentimes, I think I mentioned this yesterday, is in order sometimes, it's a famous story, I forget the way the Shiloh was asked. You had a woman who found out she had lit candles for Shabbos early. So she took in Shabbos early, and she found out after she had lit that she became an oval. That she got the information, she got the news in between lighting and when actual shkiyat says whatever it was. And she wanted to know, well, she didn't want to know. What she did was she immediately sat down on the ground, took off her shoes, and put on other ne'ilas sandals. She put on other types of shoes to show signs of mourning. Sat down on the ground for a couple of minutes, and then got up and then wanted to know. It was Erev Yontiv, not Erev Shabbos, and she took in Yontiv early. She wanted to know, was her Kabbalah's Yontiv of Tosefes Yontiv? She came to ask the Shaila afterwards. Have I knocked out my shiva?
It's like the smartest woman.
Smartest woman in the world, yeah. She chapped. It's like she's thinking, I don't want to sit for the next week. So she asked the Shaila. She said, "What do you got? What do you got?"
That's what it says. Because confused read that I'm confused. If just for first 3
If
months.
Pesach, Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot falls within Shiva, 7 days are deducted from the 30-day period of mourning because Shiva has terminated, even if only one moment of Shiva was observed. Okay, that's consistent. Yeah. Okay, Yom Tov itself, even if only one day, counts as 7 days towards the 30 days. Yeah.
What's that mean?
Meaning, let's say you have Shavuos, right? We don't count the day of Shavuos as 1 day. We count the day of Shavuos as 7 days.
Why?
It's
To be consistent with the others.
yeah, I don't know. That's a good
And
question.
it takes away the shloshim?
What's that? So 7 days towards the 30 days.
Because if it knocks out your shiva, we act like now you have only 23 days left.
You
That's
count
1 day
Shavuos
towards
as 7 days. Wow.
But
Right.
it's like
The first day of Yontif counts for 7 days. The second day of Yontif counts for only 1 day. Meaning, let's say, I guess the Misa happened.
But the
on
shiva is
second
over.
day.
The shiva was over.
Shiva's done. Yeah.
And now, after you start your shloshim.
Start your shloshim. How many more days do you need to count? We deduct, however,
8 days?
well, in this scenario, if you already have a Yontif coming in there, you would knock out 7 days.
is that
Or 8 days on
Is
Yontif.
that a bit drunk?
Yeah, and you knock out 8 days. 7 for the first day and 8, 1 for the second day?
No, I think second day there means this Yontif Shalgolios, not second days.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
sure.
I remember I had.
Right, yeah. So let's say Shavuos.
Rabbi Berker's book?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, yeah, it sounds like it.
It'll
It'll be 8 days?
Really? Why not got,
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Wow.
what's the numbers? Why not got 7?
I had this book, they gave it to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what the lumdus is. I'm assuming it would be to maintain consistency with other Yom Tovim. So let's say by Shavuos, because in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, where we had a Tashlum and it went for 7 days. Yeah, but I'm not sure.
10 copies, they give it to whatever of it.
The funeral,
Get it to.
Yeah, there's a couple of like good English books. You have
Also
the
the
Maurice Lamb's.
What?
You know what's
How much this book
Yeah.
cost? I don't know.
You found it for me?
I got it for free.
I
So
my next door neighbor happens
If I
to work
have
for
it.
Art Scroll as like
I
Is
the.
that on
think
our
I
script?
have this in my house, I can give you one.
Which
I
one?
have the-
Which one's for sure?
I'll Google it.
I think I have it in
I've
the
never bought
house.
one Art Scroll from in my life.
He's proud of it.
I have no-
Tana Rabbanan.
If the rabbi insists, I'll try.
Yeah, all right, let's hop right before it gets too late. Tana Rabbanan, Kim Kvi Semi Dishlosh Yom Kodim Regel. So according to the Chacham Rebbe Eliezer, if you have 3 days of Avelis before Yontiv, then Eino Tzarech L'Chois Achar Regel, it's Mevatel, but less than that, not the Rebbe Eliezer. Chachamim Oyrim Afilu Yom Echad, Afilu Sho Achas, as long as you know some form of Avelis beforehand, like in that Shaila, I think it was a Shaila that was asked, the Noid Yehuda with the woman
Yeah.
who was Makabel Yontiv early, so it was a Tosefes Yontiv Shaila. She wanted to know, meaning I think the way the response came, Noid Yehuda, maybe it was in a Tziv, I forget. The answer came back something to the effect of, you shouldn't have done what you did, but now that you did, it could be it works. Meaning it could be you were Makabel Yontiv already, and really you shouldn't have been Noyeg Avelis, but how much of a Yontiv is it really in that Kabbalah? Is it Mamish Yontiv, or is it only some sort of a quasi type of level where maybe we will allow you to be Noyeg the Avelis then? Regardless, I don't know what the Shaila, I don't know if
How did they possibly?
I'm not sure how he paskined in that scenario. I think he didn't want to paskin. I think he didn't want to paskin that it was mutter for her to just not do the shiva, but I don't remember. It could be he didn't paskin. It could be he was bothered by what she did. Like,
She needs an answer, what?
go to another rough. Amar Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon hein divrei b'shama hein divrei beis Hillel. He says Rabbi Elazar and the Chachamim here is the machlekes b'shama beis Hillel, which gives a lot of tochef, a lot of strength to the reason why we hold like the Chachamim here in the face of Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar also makes sense. Rabbi Elazar is the Talmud of Beishamai, right? He's called
What do
Eliezer.
you say now?
Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon hein divrei b'shama hein divrei beis Hillel is saying that Rabbi Eliezer's opinion that you need 3 days is like Beishamai.
Oh, but we don't-
And the Chachamim is like Beis Hillel, which is good. Beis Shammai Yomim Shloshi Yomim, Beis Hillel Yomim Afilu Yom Echad, which is how we hold like Beis Hillel. Amar Rav Huna, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amri lo Amar Le Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rav Huna. Afilu Yom Echad, Afilu Sha'achas. Right, so he holds that the halacha is like we just said, the way we hold it, that as long as you have even a moment of avelus before Yontiv is mevatel. Rava Amar, for some reason I don't know why, halacha katan didan da Amar Shloshi. He holds like our Stam Mishnah. And I guess maybe that's why he holds the halachas like the Stam Mishnah, even though it's like Beis Shammai, even though it's like Rebbe Eliezer. Ravina Ikla the Surah de Pras. Ravina went to the Surah de Pras. Amarle.
It appears that Rebbe passed him that way, so we have to accept it.
Yeah, but it's a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, he has to know that it's the Shita Beis Shammai. I mean, it's a little bit difficult. Amarle Rav Chaviva le Ravina Hilchas Amai. Okay, Lamai. So what's the halacha? Amarle Afilu Yom Echad. What's?
Hold on, Rebbe, not-
Yeah. Why would Rebbe paskin a Stam Mishnah?
Right.
Yeah. Amarle Afilu Yom Echad ve'Afilu Shoachas. And that's the halacha. And that's how we come out. Halacha Lamaisa. Okay. Yosef Rabbi Chia bar Rabbi Ami Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Akila. They were hanging out on the patio. The Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar of Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar. And Nafak Milsa Beminayu. And guess what? You put a bunch of Talmidei Chachamim have some sweet iced tea on the porch in Alabama, and they start talking about Hilchos Avelos. Minayin LaAvelos Shiva. How do we know that Shiva is Shiva? I mean, we call it Shiva because it actually is 7 days, but how do we know it's supposed to be 7? Why don't we call it Tisha? Why don't we call it Chamisha? Well, why Shiva? Why 7 days? The pasuk says in Amos, "V'afachti chagechem la'evel," that I shall change Nabach your chag, your yontiv la'evel to morning. Ma chag Shiva, af Avelos Shiva. See, right? So the Gemara here asks the obvious question: well, why'd you pick Sukkot or why'd you pick Pesach? That's 7 days. Ve'ema atzeres techad yaima, and maybe we should say it's 1 day. So he says, no, you're right. We do this drasha for that too, but not for this halacha, for a different halacha. Humi b'yalei l'kadir shlakish. Amar shlakish b'shur mebiyud nesiya minayin l'shmua rechayka she'enu nehegas el yoyim echad. What's a shmua rechayka? So we're going to just say it's simple. So this is what I was referencing before. What happens if a person only finds about the Ovel later? So shmua rechayka means he didn't find out about it till later. And again, in their times, it makes sense to call it a shmua rechayka because it took time for a message to travel. Nowadays, it might just be out of you're just not part of the community, whatever it is, you may not find out about it. It's very unlikely a person who's going to be chayiv. Well, let me say it this way: the way we hold, it's virtually impossible for you to not know about someone who's a karov that you know.
Live in a cabin and you decided to
We'll see on Amid Bays. We'll see on Amid Bays that there are certain shitas, and we technically hold like this, that you're actually noyeg avelis for significantly more than the 7 that we typically hold avelis for. And so it is possible. You could be talking about a scenario of achos imi or something like that. You might not know your aunt died. I mean, it can happen. But we'll get to that. So the point is that this v'hafachti chagechem la'evel that we learn out from Shavuos, that's to teach us. We use that to teach me that you're noyeg 1 day of avelos when it's a shmua rechayka. If you only find out about it, and I'm going to let you in on a secret, we're about to find out. A shmua rechayka is if you find out about it after 30 days. If you find out about it 30 days after the misa happened, you're noyeg 1 day, and you're someone who has a din of an avel, you're noyeg 1 day of avelos, and that's it, and then you're done. Where do we learn that from? From the pasuk of v'hafachti chagechem la'evel. So you see from over here that you can call it a chag because Shavuos is a chag. Since Shavuos is a chag and Shavuos is 1 day, you see you can have scenarios of avelos that are going to be 1 day. Taisus over here asks, why didn't we take the original pasuk and learn that I mentioned earlier from Sukkot, which is 8 days? Taisus says Shmini Atzeres is different yontiv, and therefore it's 7 days. Fine. Okay, so we have a drasha. And again, it's not clear. This drush has got to be a smachta because even according to Rishon holds the deraisa, it's only the first day that's deraisa, not the days afterwards. So now we have a makor for shloshim. We saw yesterday that learned that from Nazir. Now we have today a makor for shiva. We'll see if maybe we'll find makaris for the other ones. But
for the 1 day that we don't.
And 1 day for when it's a shmur rechayka. And it's interesting. Is this also a makar for the general idea of the first day? Because the first day is considered menatyrus. That Gemara doesn't seem to mention it. The Rishon speak it out. Okay. Tanur Rabbanan. Once we're mentioning Shmuel Rechaika, let's discuss the sugya. Tanur Rabbanan Shmuel Krayben Hagas Shiva Shloshim. According to the Tanakhama, we're going to say over here that if a person, this is the normal case, Shmuel Krayben, meaning you find out a person finds out he's an Avel, he has normal dinam of Shiva, normal dinam of Shloshim. However, Shmuel Rechoka Einon Hagas El Yoimecha, which is what we just said. Ezehu Ezohi Krayva ve'Ezohi Rechaika Krayva v'Seich Shloshim Rechaika l'Achar Shloshim. It's 30 days. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, although with Das Yachid, here he's the one who expresses the halachic opinion that we hold like, which is that if it's less than 30 days, you find out. The halacha is you're noyeg normal dinam of Shiva and Shloshim, whereas if it's after 30 days, you're just noyeg 1 day. Meaning, according to the Chachamim, there's no such thing as a Shmo Rechaika. Whenever you,
this must have been
very common. Yeah,
people found out and they had to do 1 day of or whatever they did.
Yeah.
It seems 1 day.
According to the Chachamim, there is no distinction. So really, there's no such thing as a Shmuel Krayv, a Shmuel Rechaika. Whenever you find out, even if it's years later, and you're not a normal Shiva and Shloshim. We don't. Yachid Mekel v'Rabbim Machmirim. In normal scenarios, when you find the Yachid is being Mekel and the Rabbim are Machmir, so you have two reasons. You have the Rabbim and the Chumrah, very strong reason to generally go like the Rabbim, and this is one of those scenarios. And normally we would say Halach Rabbim. However, Chutz Mizu, this case is an exception. Why? Shafal Pish Rabbi Akiva Mekel v'Chachamim Machmirim Malach Rabbi Akiva. Why? The Amr Shmuel Halach Kedivra Mekel ba'Aval. Like I said earlier, we hold like Shmuel, who holds that we're Mekel by Aval. Therefore, we choose to go like Rabbi Akiva. I'm not sure.
I wasn't here for Erev. But
What's the question, Eric?
I wouldn't say
I thought I remember you make up later.
I don't remember.
I wouldn't say two reasons, because usually we say both of the Torah.
That's true, correct. Yeah,
So
you're
it's like two countervailing.
Yeah, that's correct. That's a good point. Rabbi Chanina Asyale Shmuel da Avua Mibei Chazai. Rabbi Chanina heard Nebuch, his father, had passed, and he heard it from Mibei Chazai. And it sounds like he heard it as a Shmuel Rechaika. It was 30 days past when it happened. Very interesting. He only knew about his father dying 30 days later. Also, again, if he lived in a different city and the Shmuel didn't travel very quickly. Also, the Kama Rav
When I
Chizda.
was a kid, I had a lot of people died in Israel.
No, it's strong, yeah, because it took a long time for the information.
Nobody belonged to the
Right. The Asimon didn't.
You would for parent, though. You
Yeah,
didn't
let's
find
say,
that.
no, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can happen. So also the comment of Rav Chizda, he went in front of Rav Chizda. No, what am I supposed to do? Amalei, what do you mean? Shmuel Rechaika and Hegas Leyamech like Rabbi Akiva. Rav Nosson bar Avimi, Rav Nosson bar Ami Asalei Shmuel de'ema mi bechuzai. So he found about his mother. Also the comment of Rav Amalei, Harei Amr Shmuel Rechaika and Hegas Leyamech b'vat. So therefore, that's all you're going to be knowing, just like Rabbi Akiva. Eisvei b'medvar amamurim. We have a brisa that says that this din, when is it true? B'chamisha misay mitzvah, when only going by the five that are not your father and your mother, meaning brother, sister, son, daughter, and spouse. Avalal aviv al imay shiva ushloshim. You see a brisa is saying that the din of Rabbi Akiva is only said by the five. But my mother and father, then you're always nayik shiva and shloshim. And this is a kasha. Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold like that. So how can you tell me that the halach is like Rabbi Akiva? Here you have a price that's mashmanad like that. That's a shitas yachid v'lo svirlan kavase. We don't hold like that. And how do you know it's a shitas yachid? From the following brisa: the Tanya Maaseh umeis aviv shel Reb Tzadok beginzak. Reb Tzadok's father passed away in Ginzak. V'hidiuhu la'achar shalosh shanim. He only found out about it 3 years later. Uba v'shol es Elisha ben Avuya, and here this is not Elisha ben Avuya of Elisha ben Avuya infamy of Reb Meir's Rebbe.
Wow.
It's a different Elisha ben Avuya.
Wow.
I'm hoping before or maybe after. I don't know why they, if your father's name's Avuya, don't name your kid Elisha, right? I mean, come on.
Wasn't there an Elisha with wings? He was the
Yeah, Elisha Navi. Isn't that the story with Elisha and Eliyahu Navi?
with the wings? They called him.
I don't remember man in wings.
No, there was somebody with. They called him.
Yeah, but-
Either way, so what happened over here? So Reb Tzadok's father passed away, and it was in Ginzak. He only found out about it 3 years later. This is mamish the case of Shmuel Rechaika. Uba v'shol es Elisha ben Avuya's kedim shimay v'amru nahuk shiva shloshim. So you see, this shita here, it said binayek zayin, regular shiva and a regular shloshim, right? Ukshemeiz b'nosh Rabbi Achya begoyla yashav alav shiva shloshim. And when Rabbi Achya's son died in Galus, meaning he didn't know about it till later, he was nayek shiva shloshim. So this is the first brisa. That's the shitas yachid that he just said. It's a shitas yachid. We don't pass like yes, the Gemara. This is for his son. Yeah. So
There's something a little wrong here, because the brisa, we're supposed to be bringing a brisa that says that it's a shitas yachid that you do it for a parent, right?
yeah, well that's the
Then
first
we're
one.
supposed to bring the case of the son.
Yeah, that one over there I think is its own Maimar Abusker. Yeah, the brisa is specifically referring to Rabbi Tzadok, who would do it for his father. Amr Nohuk Shavu Shloshim. Now the next line of the Gemara is the Gemara now saying a new story about Rabbi Achya. Ukishemeis b'naish Rabbi Achya begoyla yashav alav Shavu Shloshim. So Rabbi Achya, the Gemara is making an assumption here that Rabbi Achya is Rabbi Chia. That's the assumption here in the Gemara. So Rabbi Achya was nayeg Shavu Shloshim, even though it's a Shmuel Rechaika. You good? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Aini asked the Gemara, how could it be that Rabbi Chia, again in the assumption of the Gemara that Rabbi Chia is being Naik Shivu Shloshim, how could he be that he was Naik Shivu Shloshim by a Shmuel Rechaika? Vaha, and here you have to pay attention here. Vaha Rav Bar Achua de Rabbi Chia, Hu Bar Achte de Rabbi Chia. Pick your head up. Let me explain it to you so make sure we're all on the same page. Rabbi Chia, okay, was Rav's uncle through his mother and his father. You'd be like, well, how does that work out? So let me explain. I have a little chart for myself, but basically there was a person, his name was Rabbi Acha. Rabbi Acha was married to a woman named Leah. Leah had a child. The child's name was Ivai. Ivai was their son. Okay? Let's put that over here. Leah dies. So Rabbi Acha goes and remarries Rachel. Now Rachel has a pre-existing child, a daughter from a previous marriage. And her and Rabbi Acha have another son, Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia and Ivo are half brothers because they share a father, Rabbi Acha, but they don't share a mother, Leah and Rachel. Rabbi Chia and that pre-existing daughter from Rabbi Chia's mother are half brother and sister because they don't share fathers. So you now have Rabbi Chia being a half brother of his half sister and a half brother of Ivo, and Ivo and this daughter have no relationship to each other at all. They get married. They get married and have a kid. We call that kid Rav. So Rav's uncle through his mother is Rabbi Chia, and his uncle through his father is Rabbi Chia, the same person. Really, I would say, as what I mentioned before, Rav has a half uncle through his mother and a half uncle through his father. So it comes out that Rav's relationship with Rabbi Chia is the same exact path, just one through the mother, one through the father.
It's very similar to an old song, "I'm My Own Grandpa."
You're just going to confuse us, yeah. But you're right.
It's an old song.
I don't know the song.
You know, all the marriages were weird, and it ends up, "I'm my own grandpa."
Well, yeah, we'll get. We're basically going to get to this discussion in
Everyone
Yavamas.
used to know that song, at least according to my father,
Why?
Because
it was like a popular song.
in the 1947, whatever it was, yeah. Okay, but the point is, okay, so why do you need to know this? Let's follow the story. So we just said 2 seconds ago that Rabbi Achia, which we're assuming is Rabbi Chia, was Noyeg Shiva Ushloshim when he found out on a Shmuel Rechaika that his son had passed. Now, who was Rabbi Chia's son? So that we don't know, right? Meaning, right, we know that Rabbi Chia is the uncle, but Rabbi Chia had a son, whatever his name was, he passed away, and Rabbi Chia was Noyeg Shiva Ushloshim when it was a Shmuel Rechaika he found out about. Now, how could that be that he was noyeg that din of Shivu Shloshim? V'ha Rav bar Achua de Rabbi Chia, Rav, the uncle of Rabbi Chia through his father, Dehave bar Achte de Rabbi Chia, that was also the uncle of Rav through his mother. Kisalak lahasam, when Rav went to Rabbi Chia in Eretz Yisrael. Remember, Rav was from Eretz Yisrael, went to Bavel, and then when he went back to Eretz Yisrael, right?
How's Rav related to Rechia?
Again, he's his nephew. Rav is Rabbi Chia's nephew from both sides. Meaning, this is the important part. If Rav were to run into Rabbi Chia would say, how's my brother and how's my sister? Meaning, how are your parents? Right? Meaning, how's my brother and how's my sister? That would be the question he would ask him, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, Kisalak lahasam, when Rav went to Rabbi Chia asked him, Amar le, Rabbi Chia asked him, Abakayim, is my father alive? Meaning, who is that referring to? Ivai, that's Rav's father.
Your father.
Your father.
Sorry, your father, but my brother.
Yeah.
My brother Ivai, is he still alive? And Rav answered him, and I'm going to read it the way Rashi says it in his first teretz here. Amar le, Rav answered, Ema kaimt, meaning you're asking me about my father. Why not ask me about my mother? Meaning your sister, right? Amar le, so Rabbi Chia answered back, okay. Ema kaimt, is my sister alive? Meaning your mother, is she alive? My sister? So he answered him back, Amar le, Abba kaim, why not ask me about my father? Meaning Rav didn't want to answer to Rabbi Chia, but both of his parents had passed.
Both of his brothers.
He didn't want to
Meaning both of Rav's parents, but both of Rabbi Chia's siblings had passed. He didn't want to say that. Meaning, but Rabbi Chia understood from this conversation that he needed to sit ba'avelis over his sister and his brother. So Amar le l'shami, in that moment he turned to his shamish and said to him, Chloitz li minali, take off my shoes and we'll go get me my all-star sneakers or whatever it is. And go grab my clothes because I'm going to put my robe on and I'm going to go to the Beis HaMerchatz afterwards. But even though he's supposed to be an oval, you're not supposed to go to the shvitz, to take a shvitz while you're an oval. So he says, go give me my shoes, meaning go give me my Avela shoes. He puts us in Avela shoes, takes them off, and then he goes to take a shvitz and then he goes to the spa. Shma mina tlas, we'll see.
He wasn't named Avelis.
He was Noyeg Avelis for a minute, and then he took him off and he's like, I'm good to go. So now, remember, this is a question. Why? Because we said 2 seconds ago that Rabbi Achia held Shiva and Shloshim. This is a Shmuel Rechaika. This is also a Shmuel Rechaika. So Shma Mina from this story, Tlas, the Gemara says. Shma Mina Ovel also ben Ila Sasam. Number one, you see that as an Ovel. How was he Noeg Avelis? By putting on the shoe, right? Or taking off his leather shoes, whatever it is, yeah? That's the first thing you see from here. Ushma Mina Shmuel Rechaika Eina Nehegas El Yoyim Echad. Because you see, he only did one day and it was done. And not only that, Shema Mina Miktas Hayom Kikulo, like Abba Shaul, because you see he did it only for a minute and that was enough. He didn't have to do the whole day. So you see three things here. Those three things you see, but the middle one is important. You see from this story that Rabbi Chia, when he was Noyeg, the Avelis of a Shmuel Rechaika, he was only Noyeg one day. What happened to Shiva Ushloshim? We saw on Amad Aleph that Rabbi Chia, again, the assumption is that Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Chia are the same person. This is the Gemara. What are you asking me crazy questions over here? Rabbi Chia L'chod, Rabbi Chia L'chod, they're two different people. It sounds like they have similar names, but they're two different people entirely. So it's very possible Rabbi Chia Taka held like that. Rabbi Chia didn't. And that's how we hold.
I had a ton of trouble understanding this because I never assumed Rabbi Chia was.
Either did I. Yeah, you only figure it out when you get to the Maskana Gemara. Okay. What happens if you have this case of a Shmuel Rechaika that when Yontiv entered, it was a Shmuel Kreva, 29 days, right? So 29 days, and if you were to find out about it Erev Yontiv, you would be Noyeg normal dinim of Avelis. But now you find out about it only on Yontiv itself. The halacha is that after Yontiv, you only Noyeg one day of Avelis. Because we consider it, because what happened is when Yontiv was over, it's now a Shmuel Rechaika, right? And you can't be Noyeg the Avelis on Yontiv anyways, so therefore, and by the time you can be Noyeg the Avelis, we already consider it as if it's a Shmuel Rechaika, even though technically speaking, when Yontiv came in, it was only a Shmuel Rechaika. So again, this is a unique scenario. Now, let's say, for instance, it would be a Shmuel Rechaika before Yontiv. That's nothing to talk about. Shmuel Rechaika, you Noyeg one day, Yontiv comes in. If let's say the 30th day was, let's say you found out about it Erev Yontiv, I would assume you're Noyeg for 2 seconds of Avelis and you're done. Meaning you're done without even Yontiv being Mavadal. It's only one day. It's only that you're finding out about it on Yontiv. You can't be Noyeg Avelis. When Yontiv came in, it was 29 days. Now that it's on Yontiv, it's 30 days. So Matzah Yontiv, you're going to be Noyeg for one day and not Shiva and Shloshim. Tani Rav Ada de Min Kesri Kameh de Rabbi Yochanan Shama Shmuel Kroiva b'Shabbos. What happens if you have the same thing, but instead of it being a Shiva Yontiv situation, it's Shabbos? Then Eina Noyeg al Yom Echad, same halacha. Meaning Shabbos and Yontiv are the same in this inyan, and the halacha is we treat it like a Shmuel Rechaika, and it's only one day. Now, in this scenario, Kaireya or Eina Kaireya, if you have a Shmuel Rechaika, I'm going to read it the way Rashi reads it. Taisus learns it a little bit more complicated. Kaireya or Eina Kaireya, if a person here's a Shmuel Rechaika, does he tear Kriya or not? Meaning a regular Shmuel Kraiva, you tear Kriya during Shiva. Right, as soon as you become a novel, you tear Kriya. What about tearing Kriya by a Shmuel Rechaika? So the Gemara, Rav Moni Amar Eina Kaireya, he says there's no Kriya. We don't tear Kriya by the one day. Rabbi Chanina Amar Kaireya. So it's a machlekes Rav Moni and Rabbi Chanina. Rav Moni says you don't rip. Rabbi Chanina says you do. We paskin, you do not. Amar Lei, Rav Moni le Rabbi Chanina, and we'll see exactly why we paskin like that in a minute. The Rav Moni who says you don't tear says to Rabbi Chanina who says you do tear. I hold that in such a scenario you don't tear Kriya. It makes sense that you're only Noyeg one day. Why? Because implicit in that is that you don't find a scenario where you're tearing Kriya and you're not Noyeg 7 days. And yet you're agreeing to me that there's only one day of Avelos of Shmuel Rechaika. Kriya below Shiva Mi'ika. Can you find a scenario where there's a day where you're going to be Kairet, you're going to do Kriya, and you're not going to be Noyeg Avelos of Shiva 7 days? Gemara says, what do you mean? Below, I'll find you a scenario. V'hatanya, I'll give you a case. Isi avur de Reb Zeira, v'amri la achua de Reb Zeira, kama de Reb Zeira. The point is, they were all asking Reb Zeira the following question. Misha ein lo chalak l'kroya. Let's say you have a person who doesn't have clothes to tear, meaning he's wearing borrowed clothing, let's say, right? So he's borrowed something. He can't tear because he's being mazik someone else's beged. So what is he supposed to do? When his daman lo b'soich shiva, and he gets his beged back during the middle of shiva, the halach is kereya. However, la'achar shiva, if he only gets it after shiva, eina kereya. So you see over here, right? So what's this case? The case is it happens after shiva, and he rips. Only Reb Zeira Basra, and Reb Zeira said after that. Sorry, during shiva he rips. After shiva he doesn't rip. And Zokt Reb Zeira, in response to the question, or in response to that answer, only by the 5, not mother and father. And that's the kasha, because a Shmuel Rechaika, what did we say? You're only Noyeg one day. And we said a Shmuel Rechaika, you don't, according to the Shita, you do have to, according to Rav Mani, you don't tear. And here you see that they're tearing. They're tearing if it's for the father and the mother, meaning the brisa itself is not a kasha. You're not kaireya. You don't tear kriya if it's after yontif. right? After Shiva. If you only get the beged afterwards, you don't tear kriya. But when we're saying now by Medvar Mum, that's only true by those 5. But by your mother and father, you do tear kriya. This is a kasha on Rav Mani. Rav Mani's whole kasha was, how can you be noeg? How can you tell me there's no kriya? Sorry, how can you tell me there's kriya if there's no avelos, there's no shiva? You don't find such a scenario. He says, what do you mean? Of course you do. You see it right over here. Here you have a scenario where a person's going to, when for his father and his mother, he's going to tear kriya, even though there's no Zion, because the shiva's already been finished. And where the answer is no. Kitanya ahi l'kavod aviv v'imay. Rav Mani says that's specifically like it's the covet of his father and his mother, and it's not mitzad the din of kriya of avelos, and therefore don't bring me a raya from there, and let only passing like Rav Mani. Now you asked me the halacha, is it like Rav Mani? It is, but really my answer was sort of a little bit not 100%. Meaning I explained the Gemara according to Rashi. The way Rashi learns the question is that if you have a shmur rechaika, do you tear kriya? I do believe that if you have a shmur rechaika, we do tear kriya.
You do?
What the question of the Gemara specifically is, the way we pass, and I believe, is the way Taisa understands it. Taisa understands the question of the Gemara. Tell me if I'm wrong. You can feel free to look it up. But the way Taisa explains the question when it was asking, do we tear kriya or not in the scenario, he means specifically when the shmur rechaika is only found out on Shabbos or Yontif, where now, really, when Yontif and Shabbos came in, it was a Shmur Kreva. You found out about it on Yontif, but now after Yontif and Shabbos, it's a Shmur Rechaika. Now do you tear Kriya? Because Taisus brings rayas that we would tear Kriya if you found out about it later. But I'm not 100% sure. So when I said the halach is like Rav Mani that we don't tear,
You think we do tear?
I think we do tear if it's a regular normal shmur rechoka, and you're one of the avelim that would be no
Meaning
avelim.
you tear when it's an immediacy, when you just found out, but you don't tear later because you lost the.
No, so what I'm saying is even if it's a shmur rechoka, even if it's a scenario where you found out later, you would tear kriya.
You don't tear later than when you found out.
Right,
So
right.
Because like if 2 days later, because it was Shabbos, you had to wait. You don't tear then because you lost the.
Yes.
Although nowadays people don't tear right when they hear. They wait till the rabbi tells them
So we do-
change to your bad.
Or they put a ribbon, right? Yeah.
Right.
All right, let's finish up a little bit and then we'll call it a day. Tana Rabbanim.
Kriya is on shmur rechaika also.
Yeah. Tana Rabbanim. Kol ha'omre beparshas kayanim. All of the dinim where we normally say a kayan, right? A kayan is not allowed to become tameh, but when you say that there are 7 people he could become tameh for, kol ha'omre beparshas kayanim shekayan mitameh lahen avul misabel alein. So we learned the halachas of who you sit in avelis for from the who you're allowed to be metameh for as a kayan. The eluain ishtay, and it's a discussion. So what about bala, right? Meaning here it says ishtay because for a kayan's always talking about. But what's the halacha? I assume the halacha is the same way for a man, meaning it's just mentioning ishtay. Ishtay aviv v'imay, achiv v'chaysay, b'noy u'bitay. So these are the 7. Now I just want to point out over here, it doesn't say it, but when we say achiv v'chaysay, it means from your father, not from your mother. Meaning the list that we're referring to right here is only referring to the father. And again, it's all midrabanan, but let me say that again. The first ones I just mentioned, who have a din deraisa avelos, are only the ones I just mentioned. Midrabanan, they added on achiv from the mother, va'achoso, and your sister habesula me'imai. So let me just clarify outside of here. The list of brother and sister are a little bit unique. Brother and sister, number 1, are from the father, and number 2, achoso is only if she's a besula, an unmarried woman. If she's married, minatayra, you don't sit in ovel on a married sister, and you don't sit if she's only your sister from your mother.
She's considered to enter another family and not be in your
Exactly. Now, midarabanan, we say you gavelis even for those 2, and not only that, even if she's married. So we've added from the mother, and we've added even if she's married. And here's an interesting discussion. And here, what shniyim here is a discussion in the Rishonim. I'm going to explain it simply. That it basically means, try to imagine that the first group, meaning group 1, father, mother, brother, sister, son, daughter, and spouse. Group 1, if group 1 has an avelis of any one of their group 1s, right? So a father's father, a brother's brother, a sister's sister. If they have that, you're noyag avelis for them also, as long as that person isn't like through like a half situation. So if it's your half sister through your father, and then she has a half sister through her mother, who you are not related to at all, you're not noyag any avelis. But as long as you have a blood kurva to that person, however distant it is, you would be Noyeg Avelos, Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's the sheet of Rabbi Akiva. And we'd be talking about the normal dinam of Avelos. Shiva, Shloshim, Kfiyas Amita, the whole thing.
Distant, you mean, but only 2 levels.
2 levels, meaning however distant, meaning even if it's like you share a father and then, you get what I mean.
So like an uncle, a grandfather, that's what.
Yeah, if your father's brother, even if it's, let's say, so your father, let's say he has a brother through, well, it really wouldn't matter. A father's brother through the mother, through the father, that's not going to change anything, but you get the idea. Div Rabbi Akiva. Fine. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Aimer, no, Einam Misabel El Al Ben Benoiv Al Avi Aviv. He says this idea of Shneim is limited to a patrilineal direction, right? So it goes father's father and son's son. Why? Because he holds that we say Bnei Banim Hareim Kebanim, which basically means that halachically we treat a grandson like a son and a grandfather like a father, and therefore those are the only ones you're noyeg these type of avelis for, but not any of these other ones. Meaning anyone who you, okay, so you're an avel over someone. If that person has lost somebody that they're currently being misabel on, then you have to be misabel on them as well, which sounds very much like Rabbi Akiva, Gemara. It seems like they're saying the same thing. Gemara says there's a slight difference. Meaning the way Rabbi Akiva is saying his din, he's saying that the ikra din, you have a din avelus on these second group of people. Whereas the Chachamim are saying the ikra din, you don't have a din avelus on them, but rather as a din covet for the people who you normally would have a din avelus for, you show them a covet, and therefore you're only showing them that covet when you're amongst them, when you're with them. So in front of them, befana. Right, and as an example, the Gemara brings an example. Kihad Amar Le Rav Lechia Berei, and obviously Rav named his kid after his uncle Rabbi Chia, it seems. Yeah, so Rav said to Chia Berei, V'chein Amar Le Rav Huna Le Rabba Berei, Ba'apa, in front of your wife, Nohog Avelusa, be Noheg Avelus. But not in front of her, Loi Tinag Avelusa. Meaning to say, we're just bringing a raya from this story of this, the way they said to how to be noyeg when your wife is an avelos, in front of her, be noyeg avelos for yourself. But when she's not there, you don't have to. You're only doing it as a covet. That's the sheet of the chachamim. And by the way, that's how we hold. We hold that you only do it as a covet. And not only that, we hold nowadays that min hastam, most people are moichel on the covet, and therefore, since they're moichel on the covet, there's no dinam of avelos. However, there's a very not well known halacha that the minhag has become. I think the Rush brings this. I'm not 100% sure. That nowadays, if you're one of the people that, how is it said? If you're one of the people that would be pasel le'edus, I think that's how they say it. If you're one of the people that would be pasel le'edus to the person who is in an ovel, right? So let's say you have someone.
Wife.
Pasel and avel mitzat kurva. Not,
Close relationship.
Yeah, close relationship, right. You can take a look. There's a whole series of relatives that you'd be pasel le'edus for. If it's your father's father, there's a whole series of them that if you find out about that, even though mitzad the ikar adin, you wouldn't be noyeg avelos, you're noyeg a slight avelos. I think they say something like you're not supposed to take a warm shower until after Shabbos. It's a very not well known Allah. I'm not sure if it's.
If your spouse never sitting shiva, ba'apa, and you're when she's there, no shkia, right?
No.
But
I mean, I don't think we paskin. Yeah, so we'll see in a
But
second.
in practice, like my uncle was just sitting, his wife was sitting with him all day. She didn't sit in a stool, but she became like part of it,
of course.
Like, out of respect.
She's not fapitzt. She's not dressed like to the nines going out. Yeah. It says over here in the Gemara, Mar Ukva shachiv le bar chamuas. Mar Ukva lost his brother-in-law. Sovereign lemesa v'le shavu shloshim, and he thought to himself, well, my brother-in-law is not. That's a shneim, right? Brother-in-law would be wife's brother, so that would be group one. Yeah. So shivu shloshim, he thought to be noyeg avelos mamish. Oh, Rav Huna legabe. Rav Huna went to him and said, Ashkeche, he saw that he was an avelos. Amrle sudanaisa boyis lemechol. Oh, you're being avelos because you like the food of an avel. Right, there's what's called a sudas havra, which is the first suda that an avel has. It's supposed to be specifically provided to him by other people. It's called the sudas havra. He says you like the sudas havra, so you want to be. You're doing this unnecessarily, right? So he says loy amru lechvayd ishto. We only said that you're supposed to be noyeg the avelos as a covet to your wife only when ela chama v'chamaise, when it's your father-in-law and your mother-in-law. The Tanya, like the Brisa says, that if someone's father-in-law, mother-in-law died, he cannot force his wife to put makeup on. Ella koife mitasa, he has to like imay anochi b'tzara, he has to be noyeg avelos with her. Koife mitasa, noyeg ima avelos. V'chein he shemeis chameha, if her father-in-law, mother or chamois or mother-in-law died, ena rishali he has kechelsi, because she's not allowed to just go ahead and put makeup on and not be about avelos. Ella koife mitasa, the noyeges ima avelos, and she's noyeg avelos. So that's the raya, or that's the story that sort of supports what we just saw above, that it's only done as a covet. So you're telling me over here that basically each one of them, she has to be noyeg avelos. V'tanya edach, I have a brisa that's mashmanat like that. Afal pisha amru ena reshoy locha fesishta. Even though we say he's not allowed to force his wife lihiyos kecheles lihiyos bekesses when she is an avelos. Be'emes amru, the emes is that meizeges leikais, she's allowed to pour wine for him. And here's the important line: umatzas le'amita, and she could make his bed. Umarchetz lepon of yodav v'raglam, and she'd be allowed to even wash his hands and feet with hot water, which is a kasha adadi. Why? Because in this second brisa you see that even though she is being, even though only one of them is an avel, the bed isn't being kaif. You're not kaif amita. What are you making a bed? The bed's supposed to be turned over. You're not supposed to take warm showers, and here she's cleaning him panav yadav v'raglam with warm water. So it's a stira. Elalav shmamino. What do you see? Kan b'chama v'chamaisai, when it's the mother-in-law and the father-in-law, that's when you're noyeg avelos both ways. Whereas kan, when are we saying that you don't have to worry about it? It's b'shar kroivim shmamina. We don't pass on it. Tanya nami achi loyamru l'chavadishta l'chama v'chamaisai bilva. We'll hold it.
We don't get Shmamina, what?
Shmamina, this halacha. Shmamina that Tanya nami achi loyamru l'chavadishta l'chama v'chamaisai bilva.
We don't do that. Wow, the valve.
Yes.
Okay.
Packed up. I mean, these sugas here for the next 7-8 days. We're going to be.
Can't wait to look at the outline.
We had a little Yavamas today.
Yeah, the outline is great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. We have Rav Chia little Yavamas. That's right.
Yavamas. I think, which is a miracle.